The lecture hall had the uneasy quiet of a weapons locker, every breath measured, every shuffle swallowed fast while Professor Mitchell worked the console at the front of the room. Rows of cadets at West Point Academy sat in rigid tiers beneath the vaulted ceiling, their uniforms pressed, their notebooks open, their faces set in the practiced mask of young officers who wanted badly to look unshakable. Mitchell didn't rush. He never did when the subject matter carried weight. He slid a data key into the terminal as if it were fragile, as if it might bite. "Before we begin," he said, voice carrying easily without effort, "I want you to understand what you're about to watch is not a dramatization, not a reconstruction. This is raw combat footage. It was classified for 23 years. It has only recently been declassified for military history instruction." A low murmur passed through the room. Anticipation, disbelief, the faint hunger of students who'd grown up on sanitized documentaries and casualty numbers. Mitchell's gaze traveled over them, slow, assessing. He adjusted his glasses, the small, ordinary motion at odds with the gravity of his next words. "What you're about to see," he continued, "changed everything we thought we knew about human potential in combat." In the back row, half hidden by the shadow of the upper tier, Emily Rodriguez slumped so low she seemed to be attempting to melt into her seat. Her hoodie was pulled up, despite the Academy's uniform regulations, and her earbuds dangled loose like a confession. Her eyes were half-lidded, her expression fixed in bored detachment. She had the look of someone who had long ago decided nothing in this room could surprise her. Most of her classmates didn't even bother to glance her way. Everyone knew Emily, the perpetually late student, the one who skirted hairline passing grades, the one who slept through guest lectures and somehow still showed up for exams, with an uncanny knack for scraping by. If there was a list of cadets destined for administrative purgatory rather than command, her name would be underlined twice. Mitchell tapped a final command. The lights dimmed. The holographic projector hummed to life, and the air above the central dais shimmered as the image resolved. Titan Station. The first thing the footage showed was destruction so thorough it looked like the station had been chewed. Bulkheads lay peeled open like ripped ribs. Smoke hung in layers, flickering with intermittent emergency strobes. Fires crawled along the deck plating, licking at twisted colonial marine armor scattered among debris. In the corner of the projection, a timestamp blinked, March 15th, 2147. Mitchell's voice was quieter now, as if he didn't want to compete with the dead. "This," he said, "was humanity's last stand during the Krell Incursion. 4,000 Krell shock troopers against a skeleton crew of 63 humans. Command had written Titan Station off as lost." The camera jolted, clearly mounted on a submarine body cam footage. It bounced with frantic movement, caught glimpses of chaos, Marines firing plasma rifles down a corridor that was more breach, then hallway, bodies dragging bodies, a medic's hands slick with blood. The audio was a storm of alarms, shouted orders, choked screams, the insectal screech of something not human. Then the Krell surged into view. They were worse than the recruitment posters ever conveyed. 7 feet tall, insectoid nightmares plated in segmented armor that looked grown. not built. Their limbs ended in blades that flashed like wet knives. They moved in coordinated swarms, pouring through ruptured bulkheads like a living tide, not hesitating, not slowing, pushing over their own. Dead without pause, the Marine holding the camera fired until his weapon clicked empty. The view tilted as he fell. The footage spun, caught a glimpse of the ceiling, then stabilized at a low angle on the deck. That was when the camera found her. A lone figure moved through the smoke with the strange inevitability of a storm. She wore standard issue armor, dull from ash, no rank insignia, no squad markings. Her helmet was cracked open along one side, revealing part of a young face streaked with gray dust and alien blood. Her eyes were the only clean thing about her, hard, bright, awake. The metadata in the corner tagged her Private E. Rodriguez, Supply Division. In the front row, Marcus Thompson, Top Cadet. Fuchsia poster child of the officer corps leaned forward so abruptly his chair legs squealed. "Wait," he whispered, almost without meaning to. "Rodriguez." He turned his head, looking back up the tiers. His gaze found Emily in the shadows. Others followed his movement, confused at first, then curious. Then Emily had gone completely still. On the holo, Private Rodriguez stepped over a fallen Marine, snatched up a dropped plasma rifle, and fired. 3 shots. 3 Krell dropped as if their strings had been cut. Perfect holes smoked through their cranial plates. Before the bodies hit the ground, Rodriguez was already moving. She slid under a collapsing support beam with inches to spare, used the falling metal as a shield and a spring, then came up inside the Krell line. The footage caught her in brutal clarity. Not frantic, not wild. Each motion was efficient, as if she'd rehearsed the violence until it became grammar. "Pause," Professor Mitchell commanded. The hologram froze mid-frame, Rodriguez in a low crouch, rifle angled. A Krell blade passing overhead. Mitchell stepped closer to the image, gesturing with a pointer. "Notice the efficiency," he said. "Every movement serves multiple purposes. Conservation of energy, manipulation of momentum. This is not berserker rage. This is calculated precision." He looked over his shoulder at the class. "You are trained to think in tactics. What you're watching is tactics reduced to instinct." He resumed playback. Rodriguez tore a Krell weapon from a fallen trooper, flipped it in her hands, like she'd been issued one her whole life, and popped open a panel. Sparks flew. She struck something with the butt of her rifle, twisted a coil, then shoved the weapon back into the arms of a charging Krell. It fired once, then its polarity inverted. The explosion was a white bloom that erased the corridor for half a second. When the glare cleared, the swarm was gone. Charred limbs and armor fragments rained down like black confetti. Rodriguez didn't flinch. She didn't pause to admire anything. She was already pulling wounded Marines behind cover, one by one, dragging them with the strength of desperation and the economy of someone who knew the value of seconds. "Move," she barked in the audio, her voice sharp enough to cut through alarms. "You, clamp that breach. You get him breathing. Crossfire here, here, and here. Don't bunch up." Hardened veterans snapped to attention under the force of her tone. They obeyed without question, as if rank had nothing to do with it and competence was the only authority that mattered. She held Corridor 7 Alpha for 47 minutes. Mitchell narrated over the continuing footage. 47 minutes against continuous Krell. Pressure. Tactical analysis estimates she personally eliminated over 300 Krell combatants. A laugh small, disbelieving escaped someone in the second row. That's impossible. A classmate whispered, "One person can't. The footage doesn't lie." Mitchell cut in, eyes still on the projection. And neither do the 73 Marines she kept alive until reinforcements arrived. The number hit the room like a weight. 73, more than the original crew. On the holo, Rodriguez moved through the station like she'd memorized every corridor. She jury-rigged explosive traps from oxygen tanks and wiring ripped from the walls. She dragged a broken grav plating control unit into position, rewired it under fire. And when a Krell wave poured over the threshold, she triggered the field. The Krell hit the invisible gravity surge and crumpled, their own mass turning them into a pile of shattered plates and twitching limbs. The sight was horrifying and clinical all at once. When her ammunition ran dry, she didn't stop. She ripped. A metal strut free from a collapsed support and swung it like a staff. The impact cracked Krell exoskeletons with sickening sound when one fell. She used its severed limb as a blade against the necks. The brutality wasn't theatrical. It was what you did when you had no bullets and people behind you were still breathing. The lecture hall remained silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not polite attention, not academic restraint. This was all with a bitter edge. The footage shifted another camera. External station feed, a cargo bay, doors partially blown, space visible through jagged openings, like an open mouth. Emergency lights painted everything red. A Krell Warlord entered frame. It dwarfed the others, a 12-foot monstrosity layered in thick, ridged armor. It moved slower than the shock troopers, but each step carried the heavy certainty of something built to crush. The tactical overlays in the feed flashed warnings. That made cadets instinctively tighten their grips on pens. Warlord class, Mitchell said, required anti-tank weaponry to kill under normal conditions. Rodriguez stumbled into view. Limping, her armor was scorched. One arm hung slightly wrong. Blood human and not ran in rivulets down her leg. The Warlord roared, a sound that vibrated in the speakers like machinery. It was triumph. Rodriguez looked up at it through the smoke, and she smiled. Not the manic grin of madness, not desperation, a small, knowing curve of the mouth. Like a chess player watching the opponent take the bait. She led it, Mitchell said softly, exactly where she wanted. Rodriguez turned and sprinted wounded, limping, but still fast toward the cargo bay doors. The Warlord followed, crashing through debris with brutal momentum. At the control panel, Rodriguez slapped a sequence. The bay doors disengaged. The sound wasn't a roar so much as reality tearing. Explosive decompression yanked everything toward the open void. Loose cargo, shattered plating. Bodies. The Warlord slid, claws digging into the deck. Mandibles clacking in rage as it fought the pull of space. It almost held, almost. Rodriguez didn't hesitate. She dove forward and clamped a magnetic tether to the Warlord's carapace and rode it out into space. A collective inhale swept the lecture hall. Someone's hand tightened on a desk edge hard enough to whiten knuckles. The external cameras tracked them to shapes tumbling into the black, framed against Titan's pale arc. Stars glittered behind them like indifferent witnesses. For a moment, they spun, locked together, the Warlord thrashing. Rodriguez a smaller shadow clinging like a parasite with purpose. In zero gravity, she moved differently, more fluid, more controlled. She used the Warlord's momentum against it, shifting her body with minimal motion, leveraging the tether, rotating herself into position with the elegance of someone who understood physics. The way a dancer understands rhythm. She planted boots against armored plates, pushed off, latched again, climbing toward a section where the Warlord's armor thinned near the base of its skull, a neural cluster exposed for cooling, faintly luminous. Rodriguez produced a jagged sharder piece of hull fragment she'd sharpened on the deck. She drove it forward with both hands. The blade sank. The Warlord convulsed. Its limbs jerked once, twice, then went slack. Rodriguez didn't drift away with it. She immediately fired her suit's emergency thrusters, the tiny jets flaring bright. She shot back toward the station, fingers outstretched. She caught the cargo bay frame with one hand, pulled herself inside, sealed the breach. The station shuddered, alarms screaming. The feed zoomed close enough to show the oxygen meter on her suit. 0 o'clock. Rodriguez collapsed, unconscious, just as the relieving force stormed into the bay-armored silhouettes rushing toward her. Weapons raised, then lowering when they realized the threat was gone. The footage ended. The hologram faded to black. For a long moment, the only sound was the quiet hum of the projector cooling down. Professor Mitchell turned the lights on. 23 cadets blinked as if waking from a shared nightmare. Some looked pale. Some looked exhilarated. Several stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if trying to reconcile the raw brutality on screen with the tidy diagrams in their textbooks. Mitchell faced them, hands clasped behind his back. Private Rodriguez received the Medal of Honor, he said, the Solar Cross, and multiple field promotions. She declined the promotions. She disappeared from public life shortly after the war. His gaze slid not casually, not accidentally to the back row. To the individuals who tracked her down, he added. The conclusion was simple. Some heroes prefer anonymity. Every head turned. Emily Rodriguez slowly lowered her hood. The lazy, disinterested mask was gone. In its place was the same calculating gaze from the footage eyes that had measured distances in meters and lives in seconds. Eyes that had seen hell and taken inventory. I don't do autographs, she said quietly. The words were soft, but they landed like a slammed door. Marcus Thompson stood halfway without meaning to, as if his body had begun saluting before his mind caught up. "Why are you here?" he blurted. "Why hide? You could be teaching this class." Emily rose, gathering her books with unhurried calm. The movement drew everyone's attention. The casual sling of her bag, the ease with which she handled herself, the way she didn't look around to see who was watching. She already knew. Because on Titan Station, she said, I learned something important. She stepped into the aisle, and as she moved, the cadets instinctively shifted to make room. Not out of politeness, out of something older. War reveals what people are capable of, she continued, walking toward the door. When everything's on the line, she paused, hand on the latch, as if weighing the next words. But peace, she said, voice quieter now. Peace is where you learn who you want to be. A nervous laugh came from somewhere, an attempt to break the tension that failed immediately. One student, bolder or stupider than the rest, blurted, "But you're still failing most of your classes." Emily's lips quirked, almost amused. "Am I?" she asked. "Or am I learning exactly what I need?" She turned slightly, letting her gaze sweep the room, not threatening, not boastful, simply present. "How to live," she said, without constantly calculating kill zones and threat assessments. How to sit in a room and not look for exits. How to hear a loud sound and not reach for a weapon that isn't there. She shrugged, and the gesture was so ordinary it felt surreal, coming from someone who'd ridden a warlord into space. "I spent 3 years in combat," she said. "Killed more Krell than anyone in human history. Got real good at it, too." Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in memory. "So good it scared me." The room held its breath again. "I came here," she said, "to remember what I was fighting for. To be normal. To prove I'm more than what war made me." Professor Mitchell's voice cut gently through the silence. "For what it's worth, Private, you're passing my class." A few cadets looked startled. Passing her scores. Mitchell didn't elaborate. His face held something like respect, and something like understanding. "Excellence," he added, "comes in many forms." Emily didn't look back at him, but her answer carried clearly, crisp as a salute. "Thanks, Professor," she said, "but I'll stick with my C somewhere." Someone swallowed hard. "I've got enough medals," Emily continued, and for the first time there was a hint of weariness beneath the steadiness. "What I need now is a life worth defending." She opened the door. Light from the corridor spilled in, outlining her in a bright frame for a heartbeat, just a young woman with a backpack. Nothing remarkable, nothing mythical. Then she stepped through, and the door swung shut behind her. The lecture hall remained motionless. 23 cadets stared at the space where the galaxy's deadliest warrior had sat among them, hood up, earbuds dangling, hidden in plain sight. Not seeking applause, not seeking command, choosing deliberately the quiet struggle of peace over the simple clarity of war. Professor Mitchell let the silence stand long enough to sink in. "Remember this," he said at last, voice calm, steady. "Sometimes the strongest thing a soldier can do isn't fighting." He looked at the dark and hollow screen, as if he could still see Titan Station burning there. "It's learning," he finished, "to stop,